I'm Merilyn Reeves. The League of Women Voters over many years has given me economic opportunities, but more importantly has given me an opportunity to participate in policy-making decisions at both the national, state, and local level. And I don't think any other organization could have done that as well as the League of Women Voters. I joined in Aberdeen, South Dakota in 1957. Had two little youngsters and had moved into the area fairly recently. That's the case with many League of Women Voters people. They move around a lot, and they know that they can find individuals who are also interested in improving participatory democracy, and so they get together with them. But in 1957, I didn't know a thing about the League of Women Voters, had never heard about them, but I was interested in some topic, and I have never really known what the topic was. I mean, I'm sure it was really important, but I asked around a little bit and at the library, and I was a member of AAUW, and they all said, go see Harriet Montgomery. Harriet Montgomery was the daughter of the Dakota Farmer publisher, which was a farm magazine. She was a journalist, but she was a key member of League of Women Voters. And I joined then and worked with her, moved to Laurel, Maryland. We stayed 17 years in Maryland, and at that point in time, which we're getting down to about 1968, at that point in time, it was exciting. We had all of those movements going on. Participatory democracy was alive and well then. I was interested in natural resources. I was interested in water issues. I was interested in hazardous waste. I'd like to clean it up, you know. I was interested in air pollution, which was horrible at that time, but I was always interested in water. And this is a period of time in which was it the Cuyahoga? One of the rivers in Ohio caught fire, which tells you the degree of pollution that was there. The philosophy of our cleaning up rivers was to let each state do something with it. The really big problem is that rivers do not stay in one state. And those people downstream don't appreciate the pollution that comes from upstream. So worked very hard on the Clean Water Act. That was one of the very first national work on the lobbying in Congress. Legislation. But about this time I got rather interested in League of Women Voters of the national organization as to what we were doing. I was working with some, doing some projects, particularly on water, land and water seminars, and I was putting those together. And along about 1980, I was asked to join the League of Women Voters board. And I was still working in Maryland, but just about to end because we were on our way to move to Oregon in '83. So in 1980, I joined the League of Women Voters board. About that time, and even before that, the League began to get interested in energy issues. And therefore, our study material and the work that we did, we discussed nuclear. Is this a good energy option? We discussed coal. We discussed all of the things that are in the forefront today. Wind, well, that wasn't going to do us any good in 1980, anybody thought. And so I became very much involved with that study material, and that was in 1980. I loved working in the state of Maryland. I worked on issues of the Chesapeake Bay, which was a great opportunity. I did a lot of education work for the Conservation Foundation in planning seminars, regional seminars for EPA Region 2. I worked with the local WSSC, the Washington Suburban Sanitary Commission, which provides for the county I lived in, Prince George's in Maryland, the drinking water treatment and wastewater treatment. I also served as a guide for those treatment plants and worked with that commission for some time. Beginning then, when we moved out here, I continued on the board, and believe it or not, I stayed on that national board for 10 years. I stayed because the leadership issues were important to me. In those 10 years, I probably attended, I probably traveled to more than 20 states, attending state conventions or local league meetings. I represented the league in numerous activities pertaining to the Environmental Protection Agency. I served on the Environmental Protection Agency's Drinking Water Advisory Committee. I also was involved with the Department of Energy, Federal National Department of Energy, and served on the first and only Department of Energy Environmental Advisory Committee. This was during the Carter administration, and some of you who remember history will know that Reagan was elected after Carter, and Reagan was not as keen on environmental issues as was the Carter administration. And he was also not as keen on advisory committees, and he was also not as keen on the League of Women Voters. In fact, at the time that Reagan came in, the Secretary of Interior decided that he would cancel a contract that the League of Women Voters Education Fund had to provide public involvement in regard to a newly enacted law pertaining to the Bureau of Land Management. So from 1980, it was difficult. There were huge pressures to roll back the Clean Air Act, and we worked really hard to make sure that didn't happen, and it didn't. And that was because of the pressure and the lobbying and the work all across the country. I think that during those 10 years, I also served on the Academy of Sciences National Research Council. Well, these were opportunities that I wasn't a scientist. I didn't have that background, but they were there because they knew you understood public policy issues. And this was an issue that didn't have, well, it was very interesting. I ended up going to California in regard to a study relating to selenium in the Central Valley. Selenium is a natural component of the coastal range in the Central Valley and also here in Oregon, in which the uplifting of the sediments of the uplifting of the sediments from the ocean millions of years ago or whatever contains selenium, and then it leaches out. Now, selenium, people take selenium pills for something or other, I think, but selenium is a highly poisonous substance in certain forms. And they discovered it killed the ducks, and it killed all waterfowl. And so I was down there in this National Research Council study trying to figure out what are we going to do with the irrigated agriculture that increases the possibility of contamination here in the Central Valley. I'm not sure we solved much. No, I think we did, because we certainly did as far as the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service refuge system was in effect then. So during those years, I had many opportunities that, to me, and I think back, were just outstanding, but they were all because I was a member of the League of Women Voters. The League of Women Voters, primarily after World War II, was an opportunity for women to get together in small groups in their neighborhoods, in units, and explore issues and study topics that they had selected and had been selected, and so that we could come to some consensus on it. And that was a really important time, all through the late 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and long about the time of the 70s, things changed. We had fought hard for women's rights, and we had fought hard for women having opportunities that they had been denied. We lost the battle on the ERA, but that's okay. We fought hard. Well, the point is, many women went back to work. And I can remember when that exodus started of some of our key people were going back to work. And I'll never forget one day that one of our key members came to a board meeting in the League of Women Voters of Maryland, Oh, we were so glad to see her. Oh, you know, it's so nice to see you. And she says, good heavens, I have to come back here to find out what's going on because I don't know anything unless. Things have changed in the communication world, how we communicate with each other anymore. There is too much information now, to be very honest. It's hard to sift through it. So that has affected a great deal, the work of the League and how we do things. However, the reputation of the League still remains the same. People expect that we will do honest review of bills in the Oregon legislature, which we do. Key members who testify before the committees are given well, they used to be, and I'm sure they still are, a good reception. They admire our work even though there are fewer and fewer of us to do it. Because the one thing we need more than anything else are educated citizens. And today's sound bites don't do it for you. Again, my favorite story is how I ever found the League with Harriet Montgomery. Harriet Montgomery was very interested in what would happen to the Missouri River if they put a lot of dams on the river, and that was what was planned for. She was concerned because there were places in South Dakota that had very inadequate drinking water supplies. And the dams on the river were not seen as having any opportunity for more drinking water supplies for Aberdeen, South Dakota, or Huron, or Watertown, or any of the other areas that might need it. And so Harriet worked very hard on that. And over the years, being the pack rat that she was, she ended up having a basement full of stuff. And when it finally reached time that Harriet got to thinking about, what am I going to do with all this? There was a governor in South Dakota. His name was Janklow. And Governor Janklow decided that there was too much paper in all of the offices of the state. And he sent out an order, and he said something to the effect that on such and such a date, it was very close, I think they said there were only less than a week, you are to get rid of and destroy a certain percentage of all the paper you have in your office, you know, unilaterally to all state agencies. And as a result of that, all of the history of the development of the dams on the Missouri River were destroyed in state offices. And Harriet Montgomery, the League of Women Voters member in Aberdeen, South Dakota, was the only one who had a complete history. It was in her basement. It was in her living room. It was on her coffee table. It was everywhere. So Harriet worked very diligently. She cataloged it. She donated it to Northern State Teachers College, which is now called Northern State College, I believe, in Aberdeen. And they found funding, and there is a special room now in which all of this historical material is there, cataloged and put in place. And it's very interesting that we don't lose our history. Very interesting. So that's one story that tells you the value of people who really appreciate the learning that they get and appreciate the studies.